Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We are just about at 8:30. We're going to go ahead and call the meeting to order here, if we can find our way to our seats. Good evening, everyone. My name's Brian, and I'm an alcoholic. Welcome home. Let's see, what do we got? We got our hoodies on display over here, stage left. If you're interested in getting some CCSG swag, you can see me, see any home group member after the meeting. This group, we do H&I commitments. Our group has a running commitment every Sunday night in Quakertown. So if you're interested in doing something like that, we go out there to a treatment center. If you want to help, come in there, bring a message to the sick and suffering, get on the front lines. You know, again, you can see me, see a home group member after the meeting if you'd be interested in doing that. And with that, I'm going to bring up the world's greatest chairperson in Nick tonight. Let's welcome Nick.
Welcome to the Conscious Contact, speaker of Alcoholics Anonymous. My name is Nick, and I'm an alcoholic. And welcome home. This is a 1-hour speaker meeting that meets every Saturday evening at St. Paul's Lutheran Church, 301 North Main Street in Doylestown, Pennsylvania. Food and fellowship starts at 8 p.m., followed by our speaker at 8:30. The business meeting for this group meets every Saturday at 7 p.m. to 7:30 right here. Please come early and join us. The purpose of this group is to provide a consistent message of hope and recovery through God reliance and service to others through the practice and teaching of the 12 steps. We record all speakers so that others may benefit from the message of recovery. If you wish not to be recorded, simply ask. This is an open meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. The group would like to welcome everyone, especially newcomers. Is there anyone new or from out of town who would like to introduce themselves on a first-name basis? Yes, sir. Sean, welcome. Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Charlie. I'm an alcoholic.
Welcome, Charlie. Yes, sir.
Angel, I'm an alcoholic.
Angel, welcome.
I'm an alcoholic.
Welcome. Okay, and welcome to everyone. The Conscious Contact Speaker Group encourages sponsorship. Would anyone with working knowledge of the 12 steps and is willing to sponsor, please raise your hands. Are there any announcements for the good of AA? Yes.
Hi, I'm Teresa, I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, Teresa.
Autumn, who attends this meeting sometime, she is speaking at Feed First on Monday night at 7 o'clock in Quakertown. We would love to see you there.
Please do it just for me. Okay, thank you. Our sister group is a big book study meeting that meets every Thursday at 7:30, just up the street at Salem UCC Church, 186 East Court Street in Doylestown. Coffee's on at 6:15. We have meeting lists and big books on easy terms. Please see me or any home group after the meeting. If you cannot afford a big book, the Conscious Contact Speaker Group will give you one at no charge. Anyone willing to make donations for the purchase of big books and CDs to help those who can't afford them can put donations in the jar on the table marked Big Book and CD Donations, and all CDs are available free of charge. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, the Conscious Contact Speaker Group of Doylestown, PA, and our Facebook group. Subscribe and share, and you can find our speakers there. Join our Facebook page and keep informed and share upcoming events and meetings. And now with that, I have a friend to come up and read the Just for Today Prayer of Recovery.
Hello, y'all. My name's Kara, and I am a grateful recovering alcoholic. Welcome home, everybody. Just for today, prayer of recovery. Just for today, I will be agreeable. I will look as well as I can. Dress becomingly. Talk low. Act courteously. Criticize not one bit. Not find fault with anyone, and not try to improve or regulate anybody except myself. And with that, I'm going to call Jack up here to read our preamble. Let's give Jack a warm welcome.
I'm Jack, I'm an alcoholic. This is the AA Preamble. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution. It does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. And I'd like to call JJ up to read the 12th step.
Good evening. My name is JJ and I'm an alcoholic. First, we admitted we were these are the 12 steps of recovery. First, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. Second, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Third, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. Fourth, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. Fifth, we admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. Sixth, we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. 7, humbly asked Him to remove our shortcomings. 8, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. 9, made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. 10, continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying only for knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. 12, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and practice these principles in all of our affairs. Now Nick is going to come up and introduce our speaker.
The 7 tradition. Every AA group ought to be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions. At this time, we'd like to pass the basket. We have no dues or fees, but we do have expenses. This group provides many services. Your donations cover food, rent, big books, CDs, events, and workshops. And just to let anybody know, if anybody doesn't have any cash, I do have a Venmo here. That's available if anyone would like to do that. Come see me after the meeting. There's absolutely no smoking on church property. Please take a moment to silence all cell phones and limit movement during the meeting to avoid distractions. Now, to introduce our speaker, a good friend of the Conscious Contact Speaker Group. Tonight we have Adam D. from New Jersey, the Millington Young People's Group. Let's give him a warm welcome.
What's going on, guys? I'm Adam. I'm an alcoholic. I got to say, you guys have a really nice group here. I've never seen so many people in an AA meeting in suits. And a quick story behind that, I was in rehab in California at one point, long before I actually stayed sober. One of the guys who worked in the house, he was telling me that his home group out there, he had to wear a suit, right? And my first thought at the time was, that's absolutely ridiculous. I will never go there. I've since come to learn that that's the Pacific group, which is the largest group of AA in the world, and I can't wait to go there and see it. Anyway, I do have a sobriety date. It's July 6, 2018. I've been around this fellowship since I was probably about 12 years old or so. My mother just celebrated 19 years sober last week, actually. And ironically, right around the time when my mother stopped drinking is when I started drinking. Now, a little bit about, my growing up, which I've come to learn in these rooms and from people who know what they're talking about, that the way that I grew up, the traumas I may or may not have experienced have very little, if anything, to do with the alcoholism that I suffer from. And growing up, I was an only child. My parents got divorced around the time I was 3 years old. My mother was an active alcoholic, big fan of drugs too, which, so was I. It was definitely discord from an early start. I was sent to a Christian school, private Christian school. In kindergarten, I started there. And my parents had sent me there because I think in their mind they wanted to shield me from, the horrors of public school and the partying and the drinking and the drugging. Lo and behold, it didn't work. I found it anyway. But I started learning about this thing called God at a really young age. And with the way that I was growing up, it wasn't fitting. First of all, growing up with divorced parents, to me, it was normal because it happened at such an age that I didn't remember my parents together. And that was like solace that I found for a long time, because it's like I never lost anything because I never remembered having it. But then going to this school and, making friends and seeing these really happy families, I started to get a little bit jealous. And at the same time, I'm getting envious, and then I'm hearing about this God thing, and I'm like, all right, well, if there's a God, he must have forgot about me. So I keep going through my earlier days, and I'm not sure if I just consciously blocked out a lot of memories from my childhood, or if I just genuinely don't remember them. but all the memories that I have through childhood and even through my active alcoholism, it's so spotty that sometimes I wonder if I was dropped on my head and I suffer from amnesia or something. So that was me growing up, only child. My father ended up getting remarried to a wonderful woman who, my stepmother, she was a mother to me when my mother was absent. I will forever love her for that. And I also got introduced, my stepmother came into the relationship with a daughter, so I had a stepsister, and that was kind of cool too, because I never had any siblings growing up. It was always just me. And life, started to seem a little bit better, and what had happened was, at a young age, I started to learn the terms mine, and I want, and I deserve. And I carried those with me throughout my life, and I never got any of those things that I thought that I deserved, or things that I wanted, or things that I thought were going to make me better. So it was like living a split life when I was young, because with my mother, I remember a lot of times being like the caretaker, because there's two sides to my story. Let me preface with this. There's two sides to my story. There's the way that I think everything happened, and then there's the way that everything actually happened. And tonight you're going to hear a little bit of both. And growing up with a drunk mother, in my mind, in my memory, I was the caretaker. I was the one raising myself. I was taking care of her. I do have some vivid memories of carrying her out of concerts because she was too drunk to walk, right? But what I've learned in recovery is I was really good at forgetting about all those times that it wasn't like that. See, I only want to see things the way that I want to see them, and that's it. I'm not able to see anything any other way. So that was my life with my mother, and then going with my father and my stepmom, it was happy. It felt more like a whole family, right? So then I started resenting my mother for just having to go back to her. And that was just constant through my life. I had finally gotten to a point, was it 10th grade, I had left the private school and I went to public school, and it was a big shock for me because the private school I went to was tiny. My 8th grade graduating class had like 5 people. And actually, right before I went into public school, a little bit before that, in 1999, Hurricane Floyd. And this is where like my resentments towards God really, really took off. And I'm gonna get into it later why those resentments kept me out of these rooms for a really long time. 1999, Hurricane Floyd, I was 8 years old. I had lived in Bound Brook at the time. Anybody who remembers that hurricane probably heard the town Bound Brook. And where we lived, we got completely flooded out there. Our basement was filled, I think 4 or 5 feet of water through the rest of our house. Our house had to be completely rebuilt. And when I was young, I collected Beanie Babies. And I had a bunk bed. And on top of the top bunk, I had all of my Beanie Babies. And my top bunk was above the water line in the house, so they were all safe except for one. I remember walking back into that house after the water had receded. The only Beanie Baby that got absolutely destroyed, fell off the bed, muddy flood water, was a bear on his knees named Faith. Right, so once again, going to Christian school, this happens. The way I grew up, God was not something I had any interest in. You would say the word and I'd start foaming at the mouth. So much later on, when things started to become problematic and I dipped my toes in this room, you guys said it and I was out the door. You said power greater than yourself, I was out the door. I looked at the steps where almost every single one of them has a word with a capital letter in it, right? Power, capital P, I know you're talking about God. Him, capital H, I know you're talking about God. I wanted nothing to do with it. So, anyway, back to where I was. I get into public school and it was a shock. Right, because now there's all these people and, in crowds, out crowds, popularity. It wasn't something I was really all that familiar with. And when I went in there, right, I didn't know it at the time, but I was so filled with fear that I wouldn't talk to anybody, right? Like I'd just put my head down, be this little loner because then you're just going to think that, I'm a tough guy or something. You're not going to bother me. I was afraid I was going to get bullied. I didn't know what was going on. And people were attracted to me for some reason. I don't know if it was because of some facade that I had on, but what happened was I started to make friends. And this was around the time that my mother started trying to get sober. And it took my mother 2.5 years to get 90 days sober. And I will never forget that because that was a goal, which we'll probably get to again at some point. So I started making all these friends, and I was supportive of my mother when she first came to AA, right? Because my mother is trying to be a better person. I remember going to her with meetings, and that was my first exposure to these rooms, this fellowship. Now, once again, I want to say it again. My memory is two versions, the way I think everything happened and the way everything actually happened. What I remember going to AA when I was younger with my mother was, you'd get a guy up here and he'd go and he'd talk about, been divorced, lost custody of my kids, spent 3 months in jail, had 4 DUIs, and I'm an alcoholic. And what I started to do was associate consequences with alcoholism, right? I didn't really have any clue what alcoholism actually was, but I had created a picture of what I thought it looked like. And I didn't know, but I had made a decision right then and there to make sure I never fit that picture that I had built. So eventually it started getting kind of annoying. My mom's always going this AA stuff, always wanted me to go. Now I'm becoming a teenager. I want my freedom. I want to hang out with my friends, yada, yada, yada. Sophomore year of high school, and we were looking for a place to party, and all of a sudden my mom was out on an AA retreat, so I had an open house. I started to really like AA. And this was a picture of the kind of son that I was, because I thought that I was supportive. My genuine thinking back then was, it's fine if I throw a party as long as it's cleaned up before she gets home, right? No harm, no foul. She never knows. And that just, it kept going through high school. The first time, I tried to hold off on drinking for a long time because I didn't want to be like my mother. I didn't want to be an alcoholic, right? So I lasted until the late age of 15. And I remember sneaking out of the house, sneaking down to a friend's house, a couple houses down, climbed in her window. And now, mind you, I always had this facade that I felt like I had to keep, right? John Wayne syndrome, show no fear, show no emotion, never ask for help, always look like you know what you're doing. So I get to her house and she hands me a bottle of Svedka and a bottle of cranberry juice, right? And I'm not going to say, hey, I've never really drank before. Can you help me make a drink? I just take it and I go back in the corner and I start making my drink. It had way, way more Svedka in it than it did cranberry juice. And I will never forget that first sip. It hit my mouth. It was disgusting. I swallowed, right? But it was just that warm sensation slivering all the way down my throat till it hit my stomach. And it was like every weight that was on my shoulders from my entire life that I had been carrying and instantly fell off. I didn't know what happened, but I really liked it. Now, I'm sure a lot of you can relate. The first time you drink, you probably drink way too much because you don't know what you're doing, right? And everything ends up coming back up. Now, because there's cranberry juice in it, it all started coming up red. So then I started freaking out thinking, oh my God, I'm dying, blah, 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 whatever. I thought it was all blood. Now, the next morning I woke up and my first thought, I swear to you, put my hand on the Bible, my first thought was I'm never drinking cranberry juice again. And I tell you, I held true to that promise until a point in my life, which we'll get to later on. But right then and there, I had decided that anytime alcohol was available, I was going to pursue it because the effect that it brought was something I had never experienced before. Right? And that was my entire high school career. I was either the guy throwing the party, organizing the party. I knew somebody who can get us some liquor. We'll go sit in a park and drink. I don't care. And that it went right through high school like that. And at the same time, I was becoming popular, right? Because in my head, when it came to high school, I was pictured like the 90s movies, or Breakfast Club. That was 80s, I think. But I wanted to be Bender. I wanted to be that guy that didn't care. He was just cool. That was my image of what I wanted to be. And I think I was actually pretty good at succeeding with that. I ended up being prom king. I was varsity captain of the soccer team, right? And that was probably the first time in my life I thought that I had arrived to a point where this is great, right? Alcohol did that to me too, but just the life circumstances, this image that I had built, I finally fit what I thought I needed to fit to be okay. And then we graduated, and it all went away. And right before graduation, I had gone to a vocational high school. I had gone for carpentry. I was always good at working with my hands. School, not so much. You put me in a classroom, you lose my attention. So all the VOTECs, they have this organization. It's called Skills USA. They hold competitions. It starts at a regional level and then goes to a state level and then goes to a national level. My senior year of high school, I had won the state competition. So my school was going to send me to Kansas City, Missouri to compete in this national competition. Now, there's a part in the book where it asks us, how many things have we sacrificed to this allergy? right? And this allergy, I'll get to talking about that in a little bit, but they're talking about my allergy to alcohol. And this was the first time I really remember experiencing sacrifice to it. Because what happened was they said, we're going to fly you out to Kansas City. You're going to compete in this competition. I'm like, all right, that's great. They said, only thing is you're going to have to leave the day of graduation, so you're not going to be able to walk. I said, whoa. I said, it's a miracle that I'm graduating. There's no way I'm missing my own graduation. In the back of my head, what was really going on is there's going to be a lot of parties that night, and I don't want to miss them. So they made a special exception for me. They said, all right, you know what? Go to graduation. We'll put you on a plane like 3, 4 in the morning. You'll get there. You'll have like 2 hours to relax, and then the competition starts. I said, all right, great. So what did I do? Went to a party, did the things that I do. And I made it to the airport. Don't remember much of it. Made it to Kansas City. Passed out in my hotel room and missed half the competition. And the funny thing is I didn't care. Right? My parents had flown out there, and they were all kinds of disappointed. And I'm like, what's the big deal? So this was when my drinking started to become slightly problematic, which was not something that I had realized until much later. See, I did end up suffering a lot of consequences, which I may or may not get to, I don't know. But not once through any of the consequences from my drinking did I actually think that the alcohol was the problem. Right? I've been charged with 4 DWIs. Not a single one of them did the thought cross my mind that, hey, if you didn't drink, this wouldn't happen. Every one, it was, if I didn't go down that one road and I stayed on the highway, it probably would have been fine. If I had left 5 minutes earlier, I probably wouldn't have flew by that cop on the wrong side of the road. It was everything else. Maybe if I didn't take that shot of tequila and I just stuck with the whiskey instead. So that was, the skills competition. That was my first, what I felt real consequence from my drinking and really sacrificing something to this allergy. And it continued on. Lost jobs, lost relationships. My drinking progressed, and what happened was, all the friends that I had gone through high school with, which God bless them, they're still in my life today. They've put up with me for over a decade now, and I have no idea how. They started to do what I like to believe is growing up. You graduate high school, you get a career, maybe settle down, start a family. So I'd lost everybody that I wanted to party with. So I started partying a lot more alone, and a lot of dry goods were introduced. Listen, I suffer from drug addiction too, not to breach any of the traditions or anything like that. If there's service Nazis here, come talk to me after the meeting. But I didn't discriminate. If you had it, that was my drug of choice. So I started to question these things around the time I was 24 years old. At that point, I think I had suffered 2 DWIs. I think that was after my second one. And what was happening was Memorial Day weekend was coming up, and I knew the way I drank. And the way I drank was nonstop. As soon as I start drinking, I cannot guarantee you if and when I will stop. And I was very well aware of that, but I didn't know it was a thing. I just thought it was lack of power and choice, and I had gotten to a point where I was so aware of it that I genuinely thought that if I made a conscious decision to not try and control my drinking, that was controlling my drinking. Because I'll drink to excess then, but it was my decision, so it's okay. So Memorial Day weekend was coming up, and it was what I would like to believe was my first low. I don't want to say bottom. That word kind of drives me nuts. But it was my first point, being willing to admit some type of defeat. So I remember I checked myself into detox, and my intentions and my thoughts when I went in there was just to get this monkey off my back, right? Just because if I could get the stuff out of my system, then I'll be okay, right? Because I think that I just keep using it and drinking it because I have to, because I'm trying to keep up with something, I'm chasing something. So if I can get it out of my system, well, then I just won't pick it up again. That seemed like a pretty logical idea because that's what society tells me too, right? Nancy Reagan, just so you know, right? All my friends, they say, Adam, if you just didn't drink so much, all these things probably wouldn't happen. That was a very logical thought. And I thought that just going and getting the monkey off my back, I'd be able to achieve those things. Because also a lot of the things that I had heard in meetings at a younger age was just don't drink. You can't get drunk if you don't have the first drink, or the first drink gets you drunk. Pick up the phone before you pick up the drink, like all the oral traditions of AA that get thrown around through our watered down message. So I went there to get the monkey off my back, and it was kind of fun, made some friends. They were all sick like me. We bonded over all kinds of trauma and stuff like that. And what happened was the counselor that I was assigned, he came and he was talking to me one day. He goes, all right, Adam, let's talk about continued treatment. I'm like, what do you mean continued treatment? He's like, an inpatient program. What inpatient program do you want to go to? I'm like, no. Like, I'm just here for a week, get the stuff out of my body, then I'm going to hit the ground running. Like, I'm good. I don't need any of that. And he wouldn't leave me alone about it, right? So I told him, because, I'm a really challenging, smart guy, and I think I know everything. So I tell him, I say, look, I'll go to treatment, but it's got to be across the country. Because I just got out of a group where we talked about triggers, and all my triggers are in New Jersey. So if I go to the West Coast, I could probably do it out there, right? And in the back of my head, like, I'm saying this thinking he's not going to come back with something in California like that. And what does he do? Comes back with something in California like that. And I think they need to put up signs at all the border crossings now, like, this state doesn't work either. So, I was like, all right, and there was a bit of willingness in me to see, right? Because there was somewhat of a desire to not continue down the path I was going, but it was for all the wrong reasons. I didn't want to keep being a disappointment to my parents. I didn't want to keep letting my friends down. I didn't want my relationships to keep failing. Wasn't enough. So I remember I had my mother pick me up, and the counselor had specifically told my mother, don't let Adam go home, pack a bag, pick him up, and take him straight to the airport. So I talked my mom into going back to the house real quick because I just had to grab something that she forgot to pack. And, I grabbed a bunch of stuff that I had stashed in there, stuck it in my pocket. So it was a really fun plane ride out there. And, I went to this treatment, and, it was my first time ever going to something like that. Didn't really know what I was in for. And I'll be honest, things started to get a little bit better, right? Because I do believe that when we get the crap out of our system, naturally, we physically start to feel a little bit better. Everybody talks about the pink cloud. I kind of think that that's what that pink cloud is. It's that initial relief from the chemical and alcohol dependence. So I go there, and, at this point, there's a lot of focus around 90, right? Like, I'm finally going to AA meetings and other 12-step fellowship meetings, whichever one the bus took us to. And, everything's about 90, and in the back of my head, I remember my mother saying it took her 2.5 years to get 90 days. So right in my head, which was my eternal quest to prove that I am not my mother, I'm going to get 90 days on the first shot. Watch this. So I stay out there. I think I did like 60 days in the inpatient program. And then from inpatient, I went to an outpatient sober living for probably a little bit over 30 days. And, it was really rough living out there. It was in the Hollywood Hills. It was like a $3 million mansion. Thank God for insurance companies. But what I did was, I was going to a lot of meetings, right? Because growing up, hearing stuff in AA, there was a lot of focus around the meetings and the fellowship. So I thought that if I just went to a lot of meetings and talked to people, because they tell you go to a meeting and talk about your problems, which I have a very different belief on that now. But at the time, I'll go here and I'll just vent the entire meeting. And it didn't work. But what happened was I had hit 90 days. I had hit 92 days, and I remember waking up, and I didn't feel better. I really didn't. I had woken up, and it was just, that weight was back on my shoulders. And it was funny, probably like 2 years ago, I was speaking at a meeting, and I was talking about that story, and I had a God moment, thought popped in my head that I didn't actually have 90 days, because what happened about, 2 weeks prior to that, we had some freedom in the sober house. We had like 3 hours a day we had to go down to the center, and then the rest of the time we were free to go off to meetings, do whatever we wanted to do. And listen, I'm not gonna drink or anything, right? So the thought popped in my head, like, I could probably do some whippets. Like, whippets wouldn't really be a big deal. So I had the guy who ran the house, the one who was actually a member of the Pacific group, I said, hey, JJ, can you take me down to the store? I want to get a cake, right? Because I'm not just going to go there and buy 4 cans of whipped cream because that'll look suspicious, right? So I buy a cake because then there's an excuse for me to buy 4 cans of whipped cream. And I had this realization this one time I was speaking. It was like, wow, you idiot. Like, you never actually had 90 days. But for the sake of argument, I had 92 days, right? So I woke up and I felt empty. I felt like there was just a pit in my stomach. So, I had the house guy take me down to the store, and right next to the store, there was a liquor store attached. So I had the ingenious idea that I've been removed from alcohol for a while, so I could probably drink like a normal person now, right? So I say, JJ, let's go down to the store, and he pulls into the shopping center on the back side of it, and I walk in the back of this store, walk out the front door, and then in the front door of the liquor store next door. And I buy 3 airplane shooters, Jameson. Always had to be top shelf liquor because alcoholics drank bottom shelf liquor, and I'm not an alcoholic. And then I walk back out the same way I came in, and I go back to the house, and I remember pounding those 3 shooters, and it felt great. I said, that's it. I figured it out. I figured out how to control and enjoy my drinking. And the next day, did the same thing. Got 1 more bottle that time. The next day, did the same thing again, got 1 more bottle. And what started happening was a lot of guilt was building up because there were people in that house who were genuinely getting their lives together, right? And who was I to stand in the way of that? But I think really in my head was they were in the way of my drinking. And it's funny because for a period of time in early recovery, I walked around acting like nobody ever really talked about the big book and, you're all killing newcomers. I was on a crusade through AA, which we'll probably get to at some point too. And I had all the signs pointing at real recovery for me out there, but I didn't see them. The first house manager, the first rehab I was in, I had gone to him one day. Now, I'm an electrician by trade now, and the house we were in, the bathroom fan wasn't working. So I walked into his office when we were in the center. I said, hey, Vince, I need you to buy me one of these fans. I'm going to replace this fan in the bathroom for you. You're welcome. And he said, Adam, don't worry about that. Why don't you look at getting a sponsor? Maybe trying those steps. I said, no. You don't understand. This is good for me. Busy hands. I'm helping you. Never got a sponsor at that point. And then I'm in the recovery, the sober house, sober living. And what was it? I think one of the guys in the house had his sponsor come in. We had a house meeting, and the guy spoke, and I remember I thought this guy was so silly. He came in and he had like a little bit of a southern accent. He's like, I'll tell you what, this is what you got to do. You got to get yourself a sponsor. You got to get yourself a road dog. I'm like, road dog? What the hell is this guy talking about? He's like, one of those people, you guys just get in the car, you go to meetings, you go do AA. And I'm like, you just sound stupid. Once again, right, the big book, the real solution glaring me in the face, and I wanted nothing to do with it. So around 93, 94 days, I decided that was it. California didn't work. Sobriety wasn't for me. I booked a plane ticket to come back home. And me being the baffling person that I am, I booked a connecting flight in Philadelphia. Now, before I get on the plane in California, I had a prescription that I had at the pharmacy sent out there so I could pick it up for something. I go on my way to the airport, grab my prescription, start taking a few of those little rectangular shaped bars. And then as soon as I get on the plane, I start pounding Jameson. No planning, no thought, no nothing. It just happened. Now, I landed in Philly. I don't really remember much of this, but I got off the airplane, left my baggage there, jumped in the cab, and said, take me to Kensington. That was just the beginning of another run. About 2 days later, I showed up at my mother's front door. Didn't remember how I got there. Completely disheveled. And my poor mother, to her knowledge, I was in California, doing well. Right? And that was the way that I drank, the way that I drugged. That was how I went. There was never ever any planning, but the worst things always happened. I continued on like that for a while. I suffered a couple more DWIs. And my fourth one, which I was also charged with driving while revoked for a DUI, which actually comes with a 4th-degree felony and 180 days in jail. Now, I had never been to jail before, and that was on my list of, things that happen, you might be alcoholic kind of thing, which that list was always changing, let's be real. I never fit that picture. To this day, I don't think I fit that picture. So, getting locked up, right, and I had, what I believe was a rational thought. Like, there was another low, right, another moment of maybe this is problematic, maybe this lifestyle isn't working. So when I had gone in, I in my head completely swore off, like I'm done with this life. Now they had an AA meeting that came into the jail. And, I'm like, all right, you know what, I'll give this thing a try. Because I'm going to be honest, I always knew that this program worked. I had seen it in my mother, but it just wasn't for me. You guys didn't have the flavor I wanted. So this AA meeting came to the jail, and there was a bunch of, prim, proper, older guys, and my first thought looking at them, because they'll sit on the other side of the table and say, I know exactly how you feel. I say, really? How much time did you spend locked up? He said, oh, I've never been locked up. Right, and right there, it lost me, absolutely lost me, because there's so much talk of identification, but at that time, as a newcomer, I can't identify on the level I need to. I identify on such a superficial level. If you don't have the same kind of job as me, if you don't look the way I do, if you don't have tattoos, piercings, a little rough around the edges, well, I can't identify with you. But what I did when I went to those meetings was I got a book, because there was like a little voice in the back of my head. It was like, the solution's in the book. Something I'd probably heard at a younger age and just never actually heard. So I get a big book and I go back to my bunk, and in my time around a couple of other fellowships, they had books where it was like very clear, step 1, this is what we do. Step 2, this is what we do. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to give these steps things a try. So I go back to my bunk and I'm flipping through and I'm just skimming, right? I'm looking for the part where it says, this was step 1 and this is what we did. I couldn't find it. I'm like, all right, maybe step 1's not that important. Let's find 2. Couldn't find it. All of a sudden I kept arriving at step 3, and then they went off talking about God and you lost me. Right, and what I learned, not at that time, but that's the importance of a sponsor. I needed somebody to guide me through these things. I got out, and well, actually, before I got out, hold on, quick story, cranberry juice. So I was in the workers' pod. I worked in the kitchen. I was responsible for feeding the jail, feeding the officers, stuff like that. And there was one day, my bunkie comes back, and this dude was lit. Like, one look at him, I could tell, like, this dude was lit. And I'm like, what's going on? Because every time we tried to make some hooch, it would get busted. We never got anything. And he pulls this rubber glove out of his waistband, and it's got something in it. He goes, here, have some. I'm like, what is it? He goes, it's hand sanitizer. Now, my first thought, which I absolutely believe and convinced is a rational thought, is I said, that's absolutely disgusting. You're just drinking that straight? And then my second thought was, let me find something to mix it with. There was nothing available but cranberry juice. So I ended up getting lit up on cranberry juice and hand sanitizer. That lasted for about 3 days, and when I finally came out of it, my first thought, I was genuinely more upset at the fact that I drank cranberry juice again than I was hand sanitizer. And then when I was actually upset about the fact that I was drinking hand sanitizer, it wasn't because it was just me drinking hand sanitizer. It's because it was called like SaniSafe or something. It wasn't Purell. It was a bottom shelf hand sanitizer. So not only had I stooped to the low of drinking hand sanitizer, but I'm drinking bottom shelf hand sanitizer. Right? And I got to tell you, nothing about it tasted good, but it gave me the effect I was looking for. Right? Because I'm that person that drinks for effect. I used to think that I drink for taste. Right, when I was going through my IDRC classes, because I had to do like 16 weeks of group therapy because the 48-hour program wasn't enough for me, because I think I blew like a 0.24 and I was whatever. So, I had every week I had to go to a group therapy class, and they gave us drug and alcohol tests there too. And I had figured out the proper system. I had no license, so I had to walk there. It was about 2 miles from my house. And I knew that alcohol is out of your system the way they test it in about 5 days. So that gave me 2 days to drink, the night that I would leave that group and then the next day. And I'd leave that place, right, and I'd walk into the liquor store and I'd walk up to the beer counter, because at this point, I'm controlling my drinking a little bit. I'm not going to drink anything hard. So I walk up to the beer counter and I'm looking in the fridge, right? And you got, this triple pumpkin IPA and this black, yellow, something tan, quadruple IPA and all this fancy stuff. And I'm looking, trying to figure out what my taste is for the night, right? What I was really looking at was the alcohol content. Because for some reason, every time that I left there, whatever I had, the highest alcohol. So I got out of jail, right, and I'd sworn off it again, right? A little bit of clarity, seeing the insanity, what I'm doing, getting drunk on bottom shelf hand sanitizer. The night that I got out of jail, I was drunk, and then within a week, there was a bunch of other stuff in my system too. My moment of true defeat, there was nothing that caused it other than pure hopelessness. Right, the third step talks about making a decision, and when you break that word down, you got the prefix D, which is off, and scission is like an incision where you cut. Right, so a decision is to cut off all other options. I didn't know, but I was out of options at that point. And I finally came crawling to these rooms with nothing, and it wasn't a life circumstance that caused it. Because growing up in the rooms, I thought that one of these DUIs was going to scare me sober, or getting divorced was going to scare me sober. I was never married, but maybe it'd scare me sober. I always thought that the hopelessness that was necessary for real recovery was going to come through a consequence, and that wasn't my experience. It was just a God-given moment of clarity where I saw that I was using multiple different chemicals to try and get myself off of alcohol and other chemicals. And I was done. So I finally came into these rooms, and thank God I fell into the group of guys that I did, because they took me under their wing and they threw me into the book immediately. The first thing that I learned sitting down with my sponsor and his grand sponsor and his sponsee brother, there was a whole big family going on, and we started going through the doctor's opinion. Now, I had seen the chapter before, but it's in Roman numerals. So if there's anything that I know from the guy who failed English about 4 years in a row, is that the book starts at page 1, not Roman numeral something or other. To this day, is probably my favorite chapter in the book because it describes me, and it was written in, the 30s? Right, and they talk about this allergy, this phenomenon of craving, and I'd heard the term allergy in these rooms before, but it was always, I'm allergic to alcohol, and I drink, I break out in handcuffs, ha ha ha. And that ended up being my story, but at the time and for a long time it wasn't, right? Because not every time that I drank did I end up getting arrested, right? So I'm not like you, I don't have this allergy. And my mind is limited to the things that I think that I know, right? And even around words, I hear the word allergy, I think of food allergy, right? Peanuts, throat swells up, can't breathe, got to get hit with an EpiPen. That's not once ever happened to me drinking alcohol. So how can I be allergic to alcohol? My sponsor said, Adam, look up the definition of the word allergy. Right? And the definition of the word allergy is an abnormal reaction. Right? So that means that I'm an abnormal drinker, which the book refers to me as such later on. Right? But the problem with being an abnormal drinker is that's all that I've ever been. So I don't know what a normal drinker looks like. And the sponsor says, do you have any friends that, you go to the bar with, they have 2, and then they're done? Or even worse, they'll leave a half-drank beer on the bar and go home? Yeah, I always thought they were kind of screwed up. He goes, no, they're normal. You're screwed up. Right? And the phenomenon of craving, because once again, rehab mind, right? Oh, you go to the med window to get all your stuff in the morning. They ask, well, what's your craving level today? 10. It's always a 10. There's a buzzer going off. I'm craving stuff. Now give me everything you got. And in the doctor's opinion, this phenomenon of craving that I suffer from is not like that. Right? Because it's not a mental craving, it's a physical craving. When I start drinking, when I introduce alcohol into my system, my body demands more. Right? And me being what I always thought was the smartest guy in the room, I had to know more about this. So I did some research, and it has to do with a chemical reaction, production of enzymes in the liver and the pancreas and stuff like that, right? It gave me an answer to what it is that I really suffered from. Because the mental obsession side, I was on board with that. Listen, I knew that I drank no matter what. Good day, bad day, happy day, sad day, I didn't care, I drank. But the idea that someday I'll be able to control and enjoy my drinking, right? Because the book's very specific in that conjunction. It says control and enjoy his drinking. See, what I suffer from is or. I could control or enjoy my drinking. Because there were moments where I could control my drinking, but it took so much mental effort and focus I couldn't enjoy it at all. I'd go to the bar and I'd be staring at the clock on the back wall and I'm like, All right, this beer's got to last an hour, and I'm dividing it up in my head. I'm like, all right, so if I drink to like right there in 5 minutes, that gives me to that. I make it about 15 minutes, and it's gone, and I got another one ordered. Right? I don't have that power, and I've tried it. Right? And then I say to my sponsor, I say, but there was that one time. That one time I had 3 beers, I left the bar, I was on time to work the next day. Says this reaction never happens in the average temperate drinker. Never happens. So if it's happened even just once, if you've had this allergic reaction where you could not stop drinking once you started, you suffer from this physical allergy. I said, well, crap. Now, it wasn't good news when I found that out. I was not jumping for joy and like, yeah, I have an allergy. But it was truth. Probably the first truth I had heard about myself in a really long time, and it explained for things that I could not otherwise account. Right? Because all my friends, they say, Adam, why do you always have to get so drunk? Well, I don't know. It's just, what's the point? You know, it seems like a good idea. Why are you going to start if you're not going to finish? For a long time, my friends would suggest that I had a drinking problem, and I'd tell them I had a stopping problem. Long before I knew of this allergy. Right, so when I learned of it, it cemented me in here, and they talk about it in the doctor's opinion. It says, we believe any picture of the alcoholic that leaves out the physical factor is incomplete. That's what was missing from my picture of alcoholism. Right, I was physically different from my fellows. I can never change that. There's nothing that can ever be done. I will never be able to control my drinking. If that was my only issue, then I could live the Nancy Reagan life and just say no. The real problem that I suffer from as an alcoholic centers in my mind. Right? My book tells me that. It says, I am restless, irritable, and discontented unless I can again experience the sense of ease and comfort that comes at once by taking a few drinks. It doesn't say it comes after about the 7th or 8th Corona. Right? Because I'm on my way to the liquor store, I already start feeling a little bit better because I know the ease and comfort that I have sought my whole life is right there within my grasp. I haven't put it in my body yet. Right? Every time I tried to approach this recovery thing, I would think that by getting rid of the alcohol that I would get better. The thing that I found out is that alcohol does not create alcoholism. Alcohol treats alcoholism. The alcohol, the drugs, the whatever was a solution to me and my perception. Because what happened when I started drinking, right? All of a sudden, I think I look a little bit better. I'm a little bit more confident. I'm a little more talkative. I'm going to go up to that girl and I'm going to ask her out, because I'm feeling myself tonight, right? Nothing actually changed. I didn't look a little bit better. I wasn't a little bit taller. Didn't want to be a baller. Right? But my perception did. Right? And that's the effect that alcohol has on me. That's the grip that it has. Now look, I honestly believe that everybody in the world who drinks, they drink for effect. Right? I don't think I've ever seen somebody take a shot of tequila and say, oh man, that tasted really good. Right? But the effect that I drink for is, it's on a level different from them. Right? One of my best friends, he saw me at my worst. He's still one of my best friends today. He's what I like to consider a normal drinker. He can get home from work, have those 2 beers. He feels a little more relaxed. He's going to kick his shoes off, go brush his teeth, and go to bed now. I can't do that. I can't. But I will again unless something in my perception changes, and I don't have the power to change that. Right? And that's what brought me to those 12 steps, those things that I never wanted anything to do with. Right? So when they explained that first step to me, and I saw the powerlessness of my disease and the unmanageability of my life, which took a little while, right? Because I didn't see unmanageable, I saw unsuccessful. And I thought that living in my mother's basement with no license and no job was a pretty successful life, because it could always be worse, Right, but when it was broken down to me that my life is unmanageable and unsuccessful, but, that was up for debate. And I was pointed to the bedevilments, right? If you're not convinced that your life is unmanageable, go and read the bedevilments. And if you don't know what they are, talk to somebody after this meeting who does. Right, and it was no doubt in my mind that my life was absolutely unmanageable, and the reason for that was because I was the one managing it. Right, and then I got brought to that second step, and this is where I was like, I don't know, right? Came to believe that a power greater than myself could restore me to sanity. And like in my time in the rooms, right, I always heard people talking about, my second step experience. I sat down with a piece of paper and I wrote down my idea of God, came up with my own conception. I wasn't about that. Because I wasn't on board with the God thing. And my sponsor said, do you believe that I believe? Do you believe that, after we sat here and swapped stories about this allergy, this obsession, do you believe that I was once like you and now I'm not? I said, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm still a little skeptical because you don't look like somebody who drank the way I did, but you definitely understand. He says, do you believe that there's a power acting in my life? I said, it's got to be, because if you're like me, you can't do it on your own. I said, all right, good. Let's go to step 3. We're going to make a decision. Right? And I talked about it before. We cut out all other options. See, I had in my head, old ideas, right? In my head that this third step thing, it was like a sacrificial thing. Because they're talking about turning my will and my life over. So I had this picture in my head, people doing a third step. They're at an AA meeting. You guys are going to break out like the altar, go get the sacred AA dagger, and then there's going to be some weird pig's blood and stuff going on, right? My sponsor explained to me very simply. He goes, are you willing to make a decision to continue on with this work? I said, yes, absolutely. And there it was. Right? Because I thought that I had to create this idea of God before I could pursue this relationship with him. I didn't understand that this relationship would be given to me by going through this process. Right? I thought that God was this idea, this image that I created in my head, not something that I had to remove all the stuff blocking me from a power that was already out there. And I've heard so many cool sayings, if your God is small enough for you to understand, he's not big enough for you to trust. Right? So there was a period of time in earlier sobriety where, sponsor said, all right, well, write down some qualities you want God to have. I said, all right, loving, kind, understanding, all that fancy stuff. But at the end of the day, my conception of God now, it's not God is this or God is that. It's just that God is. And God is because I had an experience with this power as I went through the process of his steps. And I remember hearing a speaker a long time ago. He had asked the audience, he said, all right, what's God? And you got, this answer over here, this wild, profound theological answer over here. The guy stood up there straight faced. He said, no, God is a 3-lettered word, but ideas that you attach to it. And that was me. That was absolutely me. And the 4th step, I remember my first 4th step, it was going into it, before I did it, it was absolutely terrifying because the only ideas I had about this fearless moral inventory was things that I had heard in meetings. And all I heard was, mine was 200 pages long. It took me 6 years to finish. I'm like, I don't want to do that. I failed English. So what I did, I had maybe 2 months sober. I set up a weekend escape. It was an AA camping trip. I got up there before everybody. The scene is perfect, right? I'm in the woods by myself. I'm going to sit down. I'm going to do this 4th step. And I sit down. I did the worst thing anybody could do when they're starting to do their 4th step is I started to think. Right? And I sat there for probably like a half hour and I started just freaking out. I'm like, oh my God. So I called my sponsor. I'm like, dude, I don't know what to do. He's like, you're out in the woods, right? I'm like, yeah. He goes, go for a walk. I said, all right. And he goes, when you go back, just start writing. Stop thinking. I said, oh, okay. And I did. And everything just flowed out. And my first 4th step, it was the resentment inventory. It was very powerful, right? Because growing up in the rooms, I had heard people talk about 4 steps and I heard people talk about parts, right? So as I went through life, I was somewhat aware that I had a part to play in a lot of things that had happened. So I always thought that maybe I wasn't, uberly resentful. But what about those things that had happened at a young age, right? Traumas that I had endured that I was absolutely sure I had no part in, right? Because I always thought it was cause and effect, right? I did this, so you did that. Well, what did I do, right, at 3 years old? And I remember sitting down with my sponsor going over this. He said, Adam, you're never meant to have that resentment. He goes, and how many times have you used that resentment to make other people do what you want? To change the other way people look at you, right? How many times did I go into a bar and get all sloppy drunk and then go out and have a therapy session with somebody outside and say, my parents been divorced since I was 3 years old. My mother was a drunk and I took care of her, right? Look at me. These things wouldn't die because I wouldn't let them die. I had an amazing experience with my 4th step. And the common thing that I learned through that process was how wrong I was. My entire life, I had been completely wrong. Right? And this program, going through the rest of the process, I'm starting to run out of time. It changed my perception of life as I see it now. When I came in these rooms, I wanted to die. You know, suicidal ideations were running through my head every single day. And once again, I heard a speaker. Early recovery was founded around circuit speakers. Unfortunately, you don't have a lot of meetings like this with guys in the book always talking about the solution. There's still a lot of what I hear speakers talking about, the 80s 12 and 12 sobriety out there. But I had heard a speaker say, you know, I never really wanted to die. I just didn't want to continue life as I knew life. And that was me. If there's one thing I know about myself, I have a very strong will outside of alcohol. If I genuinely wanted to die, I'd be dead. Right? AA gave me a new way of life, a new way of seeing things, a new way of dealing with things. And it's so far from everything that I thought was ever going to work, because I suffer from something I like to believe is destination addiction. You know, once I get to this place in life, then I'll be okay. Once I get the girlfriend, once I get the nice car, once I get the nice house, the nice job, once I get all this stuff, then I'm going to feel satisfied and fulfilled. Well, I can tell you at 90 days sober, when I was starting to get into my amends, still living in my mother's basement, still with no license, still with no two nickels to rub together, my life had never been more full. The thing since then that has gotten in the way of my fulfillment and my happiness and my joy in life is stuff. I can tell you, and I got 2 cars at home, a motorcycle, I'm a homeowner now, great relationship, 2 cats, one of them's a little bit of a pain, right? But all these things, there have been periods in my recovery where they start to get in the way because they stop me from doing the things that I need to do, which is very simple. Continue to carry this stuff, right? Because by working with other alcoholics, that's what reinforces my relationship with God as I understand God now. And the way I understand God now is through my experiences, not my intellect. You know, I had something happen to me. I was probably about 2 weeks sober, and I was going to meetings, right? And I'm so selfish and self-centered that if the entire meeting didn't circle around me after the meeting, I thought you guys didn't care about me. You know, you guys would pass around the meeting book, get some phone numbers, hand it to me and say, hey, give me a call tomorrow. I'm like, but I'm here now. Right? But that was my memory of my experience, my first few meetings. It may not have been truth. And yeah, I was starting to lose hope. Right? I was starting to just kind of get down. Like, this stuff still isn't working. And I remember I'm at work one day, and at work construction, I was working on a liquor distribution warehouse in Elizabeth. If any of you know Elizabeth or don't know Elizabeth, it's right next to Newark, right next to the ports, right next to the airport. Like, it's a just refinery, all industrial. Like, there is no life in that area. And I'm working in this building. There's this big roll-up bay door. I'm up on a ladder doing something, you know, feeling kind of crazy, suicidal, want to kill you, kill myself. I don't know. We'll find out. And all of a sudden, this butterfly flies in, lands on my leg. Like, there's no life out here. Something with this isn't right. So I snapped a picture of it. I sent it to somebody I knew in their rooms. And they had sent me back. It was like a definition of a spirit animal. It said when the butterfly shows in your life, it shows signs of rebirth, transformation, something along those lines. I don't know what happened in that moment, but it's like I got hit with a wave of emotions. Right? It was like God was just telling me, like, yo, I am here. Because I was not going to find God on my own. I genuinely believed that I needed some kind of experience like that. And it was just so comforting. And I was afraid to talk about it in any meeting because you guys are going to tell me I'm crazy. You're going to tell me it's just a stupid butterfly. What's the big deal? Right? And that's where I started to understand, right? A God of our own understanding is not through our conception in our mind, but our experience in our heart. Right? God shows up the way that I need him to show up, the way that I could feel him. Right? And now, having experienced through these steps, clearing out all that clutter that was in between me and God and this relationship that I have now, I get to work with others and I get to see the lights in their eyes come on. Right? And my purpose in life is fulfilled. My purpose is no longer to make $1 million and be a celebrity at something because I have, no real useful talents. Right? But one day I'm going to be a celebrity and I'm going to be famous. You're all going to know me. You know, and I don't have time to talk about my spiritual ego in like my second and third year. But I had stepped away from speaking for a while because I had picked a fight with AA. There was too much, not enough big book, not enough solution talk. If you weren't talking about the steps, the solution, or God, I didn't want to hear what you had to say, and I thought that you were going to kill every newcomer who walked in the door. And that was an attitude I walked around with for a long time, and it was not attractive. And what I did was I stepped away from speaking because at the time I was speaking, once or twice a week, rehabs, all over. I'd gone up to New York to speak once. Well, I'll probably end with this story. And it kind of talks about like 6th and 7th step for me a little bit. But, I was on this spiritual AA throne that I had put myself on because, I'm big book sober and I know the steps and I had an experience with God and I'm going to beat you with it. So I got a call to go up to Rochester, New York to speak on a panel, right out of A Vision for You. And, in the back of my head, 2.5 years sober, I'm like, that's it, getting called up to, AA, big time circus speaker, here I come. And I go up there and, in my mind, I'm planning this talk and I'm going to tell all these people exactly how it is and how they're all doing it wrong. And I went up there, and if nobody here is familiar with YPA conventions, I highly suggest you check them out. But I went out there as a YPA convention, and they did this thing called a hugs workshop. Sounds stupid. I thought it was stupid. Somebody I knew up there, he goes, hey, Adam, why don't you go check out this hugs workshop, right? And I'm like, well, you tell me I don't know how to hug? So I go to this thing, and I'm not really going to try to spend any time describing it because you just need to experience it. But what happens was I learned how much I hide behind my words, how much of that fear was still right in front of my face in my life, in recovery, having had some kind of experience through the steps. Right? Because what happens is 2 circles, you're facing people, you're not allowed to talk, not allowed to make gestures, and you just stand there and look at each other for a minute or two, and then you give each other a hug. And it's a heart hug, the other hand's in the air, lines up the hearts, some chakra stuff, and there's this sappy music playing too. It was like Twilight soundtrack or something. Right, but what started to happen was I started to look into the eyes of these people in front of me and I saw my reflection. Right, they had the same fears, the same experiences, the same traumas, the same resentments. Everything was the same. Who was I to judge these people and say that they're doing anything wrong? If they woke up, didn't drink today, and they're here, they're on their way to a better life. And my ego was driving a wedge between me and the fellowship later in my sobriety saved my life. Because I had gotten to a point where just life happened. My best friend, my road dog, who I had picked up, around my first nine days sober, he had died in a motorcycle accident. This was 2 years ago, 3 years ago. And it was me and him everywhere we went. Like, neither one of us could go to a meeting without the other and not hear, hey, Adam, where's Roger? Or, hey, Roger, where's Adam? Like, it was just 2 peas in a pod. We ended up living together. We were roommates. And he lost his life in a motorcycle accident. And that was when I started to learn that even in recovery, I continued to create old ideas. But what happened was, because I had him, I didn't need the rest of the fellowship that much. A lot of people knew me, but not a lot of people really knew me. I was known in a lot of places, but I would keep it surface level because I had my best friend. Right? We're out here doing God's work, saving people. Any guy that I was sponsoring, he was sponsoring, and vice versa. And what happened was the fellowship showed up. Right? Knock on my door. For the next 2 weeks, I probably had 6, 7 people in my house at a time. Too much food. My fridge was overflowing. Some about you drunks, you think food's the solution for everything. But the fellowship saved my life. And I am forever grateful for the fellowship in this program. My life is good now because of it. And I hope I brought you guys a decent meeting.
Okay, incredible stuff. Again, my name's Brian. I'm an alcoholic. First and foremost, I want to thank Adam for coming out here tonight, sharing his experience, strength, and hope with us, delivering an incredible message of hope and recovery. A couple quick announcements, and we'll wrap up the meeting here. So the food in the fellowship for this group every week starts at 8 o'clock. Feel free to show up early. We always have our coffee and some kind of refreshments out, so feel free to show up early, join us, socialize. If you do want to get involved with service with this group, you could always use help setting up the meeting, working in the kitchen, whatever it be. There's always a meeting after the meeting, so if you want to help out with some service right after the meeting, we could always use help putting the chairs away. We put away these chairs in the front here and the ones along the sides. The ones on those tables back there will stay right where they are. But more importantly, if you're out there and you're new or you're struggling, there'll be a whole group of us hanging out after the meeting. So grab somebody. We'd love to talk with you, get you some phone numbers, get you some meetings to go to. It's customary for us to thank our speakers as they do come here on their own time and expense to share a message with us. So we do usually get in the front here, we form a line, and we thank our speakers personally. I do want to thank everybody for helping out with the meeting tonight. Thank our greeters, our readers, and most importantly, let's thank our speaker, Adam, one more time. And if you do care to join us, we have a beautiful way of closing. We're going to circle up. If you do care to join us, we will close the meeting down, as always, with a brief moment of silence for the still sick and suffering alcoholic inside and outside of these rooms, followed by our Lord's Prayer. Our Father,
who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into